Hello everyone. Welcome to our Hangout on Air on Google Hangouts and using them at work. I'm Carolyn Ujic. I'm a program manager on our enterprise customer community team. And I'm here with Patrick Wynn, a product strategist at Google. We'll be talking more today about Hangouts in the workplace, and we're joined by three great customer panelists from Kaplan, CBC Radio Canada, and Eventbrite. After the panelists tell you about their experiences, we'll take questions live, so you can submit those at any time using the Ask a New Question button. So now I'll turn it over to Patrick Wynn. He's going to give you a quick overview of Google Hangouts.
Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, so Google Hangouts is the real-time collaboration or communication platform that we make available to Google Apps customers. So any Google Apps user can take advantage of this platform. And it's been designed from the ground up to take advantage of the way people work today. So for example, it includes chat, right? So chat is this, if you think of instant messaging, that's part of the feature set within Google Hangouts. But it's been designed to really work with people in the modern setting. So it'll sync across different devices. So let me give you an example. Supposing you're chatting at work, you're maybe in Gmail, or maybe you're chatting from within your browser. You can easily carry on that chat conversation from another device, and the other people that you're chatting to may not even realize this. Another key example of a great feature within Hangouts chat is actually the group chat feature. So you can expand a chat from one-to-one to any number of people and basically continue that conversation that way. And this is really important when you think of those situations where you're in an email thread and it's like a line-by-line email updating, maybe for some emergency or something like that. It's much more immediate to just continue a chat conversation because like I said earlier, you can continue across different devices and just carry on that conversation with everyone in the group. So everyone's kept up to speed. So that's on the chat side. The other side to it is video communication. So this is something that's a little bit, frankly, new in the industry, in that we've made multi-way video really, really easy to use. And really, really simple to set up. So what we've done here is you can chat with up to 15 participants via video chat within Hangouts. And that, again, includes any devices across web, Android, iOS. And it makes it simple for you to just join a meeting. Maybe it's from Calendar. If it's integrated with Google Apps, you can just have a one-click action to join from Calendar. Or if you're like me and a little less organized, you can actually create a meeting on the fly, right? So you can just create a meeting with a name, ask other people to join it right away, and it's really simple to get started with it. There's some other features with it that we've added as well. So you can do, obviously, screen sharing. So if you want to present your slides or maybe do a demo from your desktop, that's all perfectly feasible within Hangouts video calls. And then recently, we've also added some third-party apps to the suite as well. So an example of that is, if you think of Uber Conference, they're an audio bridge. You can bring that into the Hangout as well. So you can now extend the Hangout into an audio conference as well, which is really great for enterprise customers in that kind of setting. Last of all, of course, Hangouts includes this capability for Hangouts on Air. So this is where you can broadcast to a large number of people. So you can continue that interactive discussion just like we're having now, but actually broadcast to a much, much wider group. So a couple of weeks ago, we added one other component to this, and that is another endpoint where you can continue the discussion from within a meeting room. So if I skip a little forward here, we actually launched something called Chromebox for Meetings. And this is a really simple and easy to set up device where you can connect Hangouts to basically every single meeting room you have. So it's priced at $999, and that includes the first year of support and maintenance, including a warranty. But most importantly, it includes a connection to an admin panel or an admin console where you can manage all of your devices. And make it really, really simple and easy to manage all of those meeting rooms once they're connected. So we believe with this particular configuration, it's no longer the case that video conferencing has to be the preserve of a few meetings. It can actually be in every single meeting room because now you can operate these things at scale. So that's Chromebox for Meetings. That completes the picture within Hangouts. Just wanted to give you that very, very brief overview of the product suite.
Great, thank you, Patrick. Now we're going to move on to our customer panelists. So we'll be starting with Rebecca Schlanger. She's the Executive Director of the Enterprise Portfolio for Kaplan. And for those of you who don't know, Kaplan provides educational services to students of all ages around the world. So Rebecca, maybe we can start by you just telling us a little bit more about when Kaplan started using Google Hangouts.
Sure, thanks, Carolyn. Kaplan was a relatively early adopter of Hangouts. The product was launched just before we completed the balance of our North American deployment. So the timing was good for us to add Hangouts to the portfolio of services we were providing for the organization. Originally, our CIO had a keen interest to use the product for internal communications. He wanted to answer questions like, can we replace existing licensed services with Hangouts? And what does it require to support a product like this? So our initial soft deployment was meant as an evaluation of the service, but it was partially driven by a strong desire to be innovative. We enabled Google Plus and Hangouts as a beta test for approximately 6 months within the technology department in order to exercise the services, learn how they work, and write up some best practices around hardware requirements, support, and security. Once we felt comfortable with the details, the service was enabled for our leadership team and some other key stakeholders. As the good reputation of Hangouts spread, we received lots of requests to enable it for everyone. So shortly afterwards, we turned it on for most of our businesses. We've been using the product now for more than a year.
Got it. So it sounds like you started in IT and Hangouts has really spread throughout Kaplan. So who in Kaplan is using Hangouts today?
Nearly 90% of our users have access to Hangouts. In terms of practical usage, the numbers indicate that almost a quarter of those with access have incorporated Hangouts into their work lives. Those users come from a variety of departments like marketing, finance, student operations, and of course technology, across all of our divisions, both domestic and international.
Great. And I think it would be helpful for our viewers if you could share a few stories or examples of specifically how you're using Hangouts at Kaplan.
Sure, of course. Our test prep business has an initiative called the Connected Workforce. Hangouts lets our office-based and corporate staff stay closely connected to our center staff across the country. Similarly, across all of our businesses, we have teams that are geographically disparate, and Hangouts allows them to stay connected with one another. Congregating for weekly status meetings reinforces their relationships, ensures that team priorities are aligned, and facilitates overall improved communication. Our senior executives are now incorporating Hangouts into our quarterly meetings, which improves information sharing and, frankly, relationship building across divisions that may not ordinarily have had an opportunity to collaborate. My favorite example is this one. When we were planning our apps deployment for one of our London-based divisions, we created accounts enabled with Google Plus and Hangouts for select members of our UK deployment team in order to simplify our project meetings. They were using Hangouts prior to the actual deployment of Google Apps to their division.
Great. And Rebecca, you're an IT leader at Kaplan. How would you describe the impact that Hangouts have had on your organization?
I think the biggest thing for us is a greater sense of connectedness within teams and a newly formed sense of collaboration across business and division boundaries. I think there's improved morale as a direct result of being more connected to each other and to our senior leaders. In some cases, we travel less to our locations now that we can meet virtually but still face to face. We have freed up some office space by allowing more of our staff to work from home, requiring less of an office-based footprint. And one thing that we're keeping an eye on, hopefully over time, we'll see a reduction in licenses for alternative products.
Great. Thanks for sharing your experience. Once we get to the Q&A portion, anyone who's watching can ask Rebecca live questions about her experience. So now we'll move on to our next panelist. We have Dawn Santone from CBC Radio Canada. She's a technology integration workflow manager. And for those of you who don't know, CBC Radio Canada is Canada's public broadcaster. So they provide a variety of services, radio, internet, satellite-based, and TV. So Dawn, tell us more about Radio Canada's experience with Google Hangouts. When did you start using it?
Thanks, Rebecca. We went to Google about a year ago. We're just going to celebrate our 1-year Googleversary next week. And when we went live with our 10,000 accounts at that time, we turned on Google Hangouts for everyone. So it was a bit of an unveiling to all that they could all have this technology at their fingertips as soon as we went live.
Great. And I understand you're also trying Chromebox for meetings. How have you started that trial?
Yes, we are. We've deployed boxes in 3 different of our locations, Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa. And we are slowly increasing. As you can imagine, the technology has been very seamless. We've got a great audience with our Hangouts, and people have really started using that most effectively. But as Patrick said, it's really kind of taking the ability to do video conferencing and putting it everywhere, so that not only 1 or 2 of our office or boardroom meeting rooms have video conference technology, but anywhere could have video conference. And it really allows the conversations to be much more natural, much more instantaneous. A lot of the things that we do here as a media company aren't always scheduled. News happens when it happens, and it's really convenient to be able to jump into a room and speak to your colleagues across the country, across the world, about what's going on wherever it's happening. And it's allowed us to be more connected with our staff globally.
Great. So who in CBC Radio Canada is using Hangouts today? It sounds like it's a pretty wide variety of folks.
We do. So with turning it on, we've had all different kinds of use cases that we've been watching. Most notably in some of our production departments, they're very eager to tell their stories, as they are storytellers. And so in radio, particularly, we've had some great feedback coming to us saying how they've been allowed to create programs in one section of the country and have a colleague sitting on the opposite coast, and often at odd hours in order to work together, but that they've actually been able to produce real-time content to their listeners, to their viewers, and it's been an incredible experience where they can feel connected to the material that they're creating and to their colleagues as they're working together to put this on. Most frequently, as Rebecca alluded to in Kaplan, they're having daily meetings, they're having weekly meetings, and often with different levels of seniority within the company that wasn't always talking together, and at those frequent intervals. So it's really broken down a lot of barriers for us as far as radio goes, and allowed that connectivity as well as far as to our customers and to our content. TV productions have actually embraced it very much, and as I've shared with some of you, the Quirks and Quarks show is one to very eagerly adopt Hangouts on air, which is what we're doing today, and they too have been able to use that to reach their audience and to engage technology and make it seamless. Get their content to the people that want it, to the people that are craving it, and actually remove the borders, remove what used to be a bit more cumbersome to maybe have a conference bridge, set up an account with another third-party person, get the equipment, and make sure that everyone was on the same platform, and all those little bits, those moving parts that you know, we as technology people used to try and scramble to make sure everyone was okay, and then they could get on with doing what they were wanting to actually do. And now TV, it's just a click, and it really is. It sounds simplistic, but it truly is. And then lastly, and most notably, with the recent Winter Olympic Games in Sochi, we were the Canadian broadcaster for that, and using Hangouts, we're actually able to triage some of the behind-the-scenes hiccups that perhaps viewers weren't aware of, or hoping they weren't aware of, at some of the different locations. So I've had feedback from some of the technical crew there that they actually used Hangouts on mobile devices, and that's one of the things that we love about it, is that it's agnostic to platforms. So we can use it on our iPhones or our Android phones, and if you're at the side of a mountain with a truck or with a camera and some wiring's not working, you could just flip your phone around and show someone back in a control room or something in Toronto or Montreal, and together they could problem solve and figure out what needed to get done in order to get that alpine race or that sort of Nordic competition brought right back to everyone else. So we've used it a lot of different ways.
Great, thanks Dawn. So remember, you can ask Dawn questions about her experiences by submitting questions. Just click Ask a New Question and we'll get to them at the end. Next, we have our final panelist, Jason Kuo. He's an IT support engineer for Eventbrite. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Eventbrite, they provide anyone with the ability to plan, promote, and sell tickets for events. So Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit more about when Eventbrite started using Google Hangouts?
we've been using Google Plus Hangouts for the last 6 months or so, starting from the end of last summer. And we actually didn't enable it fully. We had portions of Hangouts available, and we found that some users were already using it organically. So we had some engineering teams that were already starting to use it for multi-way video chat and text chat and all sorts of different use cases. And so after that point, we had organic adoption, and then the IT team started using it a little more. We fully enabled it for the IT team back in September, and then we have it fully enabled across the company since January. So we've been using it probably for the last 6 months.
Great. And I understand you have also tried Chromebox for meetings at Eventbrite. When did you start doing that, and how has that experience been for you so far?
The experience has been great. We've had Chromebox for meetings deployed in over half of our meeting rooms, and we've seen a bunch of different departments and people use it. It's been easy to use, easy to deploy, easy to manage, and if you can imagine, we're in a really fast-paced software environment, so a lot of things happen really quickly. So the Chromebox for meetings has enabled ad hoc meetings to happen almost instantaneously, less than 3 minutes startup time, and people have really adopted it very, very well.
Cool. And you mentioned engineers are using Google Plus Hangouts. Who else at Eventbrite uses Google Plus Hangouts?
I would say pretty much everyone in the company is using Google Plus Hangouts in different capacities. We use it since it encompasses chat and multi-way chat, that's something that in our environment we're using all the time. A lot of things can't necessarily wait for a scheduled meeting or an email, so we'll use chat all the time. Marketing and finance and all the different groups use it in different ways, and we also have cross-departmental meetings and also cross-locations. So we have offices in London and Argentina, so even if you're part of the same department, you might have a colleague that's overseas, and Google Plus Hangouts creates a really easy method for these different groups to communicate with each other, and just instantaneously. They don't have to think too hard about getting it set up.
Great. And Jason, do you have any specific stories that you'd like to share related to how you use Google Plus Hangouts at Eventbrite?
Yeah, sure. We've used it in a bunch of different ways. We've had all hands meetings hosted on Google Plus Hangouts, so workers who are working remotely or working from home in a particular site have been able to use it that way. The IT team, we use it to host a persistent chat, so we like that feature, so all of us can look back at the history of a conversation and see what's going on. We've had a situation where we were running short on phones, so we utilized the combination of Google Voice and Hangouts to be able to quickly spin up some actual phone numbers that people could use to call. I've heard other people have been using it for user interface testing, and we've used it to do screen sharing. Even our IT team, just yesterday, a member of our team used Google Plus Hangouts to do a screen share to help remotely set up something for a worker who is working from home. So just, all across the board, we've been able to use it in different ways to really facilitate the things that we're doing here.
And how would you describe the impact of Hangouts on your business?
I would say that it's been tremendous. Since Google Plus Hangouts is totally integrated into Google Apps, which is something that, because we use it for email and docs and calendar, we're using it all the time anyways. Because it just seamlessly integrates in, it means you don't have to open up another app to be able to chat with people. You don't have to log into another service to be able to initiate a video call. And it's really nice because you can do as little or as much as you want. With Google Plus Hangouts, we're doing chats all the time, but if you want to augment it a little bit to do video chat, you can do that. If you want to do screen share, you can do that. So that's a really nice feature for us.
Great. Thanks for sharing your experience, Jason. Now we'll move on to the Q&A portion of our broadcast. So again, we're going to be taking live questions. You can submit them by clicking Ask a New Question. we're using the Hangouts Q&A app, and a cool feature of that is you can actually +1 questions that you think we should answer. So feel free to do that as well, even if you don't have your own question to ask. One thing I want to note is that we can't answer any questions today about the product roadmap for Google Hangouts or Chromebox for Meetings. So if you can keep your questions focused perhaps on the product or some of our panelist experiences, that would be appreciated. So we're going to start with first a fun question, and I'll direct this to our panelists. We can start with Rebecca. Do you use any of the add-ons or advanced features for Google Hangouts?
We do, actually. We use the screen share quite a bit. We find ourselves reviewing documents that way, looking at spreadsheets and sort of comparing desktops. From the toolbox, we use I think it's called lower third, so that we can display our names, particularly if we're meeting with new partners or we're collaborating with somebody new in the organization that we hadn't met previously. We are exploring the use of remote desktop for our service desk, but so that's sort of a very small part of what we're using right now.
Great. Dawn, do you want to share some of the features or add-ons that you use at CBC Radio Canada?
Sure. So we are in a similar use case, I guess, as Rebecca would say, and we use the lower thirds as well. And just so that anyone's watching, if they haven't used that before, I'll just demonstrate quickly what a lower third looks like, and you can just turn it on that way. And you can put in, as Rebecca mentioned, you can put in any text to let yourself know where you're coming from, what company you're with, or anything that might be pertinent to the meeting or discussion at hand. And then as part of our go live, when we were particularly doing late night meetings, even Jason had noted that things happen on the fly. We had a standing after 8 p.m. Meeting invitation that when you came, you had to have certain things that were in place. So you had to come with your party gear on, because any meeting that was taking place after 8 o'clock, there was no way that we could do this with anything else. And that's sort of what we kind of helped keep the mood a little light, helped to make sure that everyone was having a good time, and that we were focusing on really part of the great thing about Google is that you get to have a little bit of fun while you work, so it's not all super serious. I guess some of the other more business-focused apps that we are using in conjunction with Hangouts is the screen sharing, is the integrated Google Drive, and is YouTube. As you can imagine, being a media company, it's very critical to us that we can see our content primarily before it's released to others, and so we've been able to really harness the power of YouTube so that we can look at our own material and get some feedback on it internally before we post it to the public.
Great. And Jason, how about Eventbrite? What add-ons or advanced features are you using?
Probably the main thing that we're using is screen share. So like I mentioned before, we can use it to see what's going on somebody else's screen for a presentation, or to even help out a remote user. But otherwise, we're primarily focusing on we're using it to do communication via video or chat or voice. So those are the kind of the main parts that we're using.
Great. And I know our next question was one that was actually shared on the event page as well. So there's some confusion around some of the Google Plus premium features that are available and how that really relates to how you're using Google Plus Hangouts. So this question is, how are other companies configuring Hangouts and Google Plus premium features? And Patrick, maybe we can start with you and you can explain a little bit more about what that is for anyone who's watching who's not familiar with that, and then we can go to our panel and see how you're configuring those things.
Sure. So the Google Plus premium features, we added those into the Enterprise Suite almost a little over a year ago. And basically it adds features that allows you to sort of manage Google Plus in a more enterprise fashion. But it includes the ability within that, so specifically for Hangouts, where you can actually name your Hangouts, right? So this makes it a much more enterprise-styled offering, and it's actually pretty important for people who are using Chromebox for meetings, because now it makes it super simple for people to actually join into a Hangout, knowing only the name and so on. So what I would recommend to Google Apps administrators is just have a look at the Google Plus Premium or the Google Plus section of the admin panel, and then to just have a look at the Google Plus Premium features and just have a look at those. And then you can just single click and you enable it, and then all those features are available for you to use.
Got it. Thanks. So now to our panel, and we can start with Rebecca. How are you configuring Google Plus Premium features in Hangouts? Anything you can share with our audience about that?
One of the more important things that we do, and I believe this is a premium feature, we actually set the default posting in Google Plus to be within the domain only. We recognize that there's an override setting, but we like to protect our employees in the best possible way. So we set that to be domain only as a default.
Got it. And Dawn, over to you. Anything you want to add about how you're configuring Google Plus Premium features and Hangouts at CBC?
No, we allow it. We actually have the premium features enabled, so we're allowing internal and external Hangouts for our staff.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense given your media focused. And Jason, anything you want to add about Google Plus Premium features and how you've configured them or are using them at Eventbrite?
Nope, nothing additional to add. Those both sound like good principles.
Got it. So it sounds like we've got some, consensus, I guess, around how our panelists are using some of those advanced features within Google Plus, as well as Hangouts. So we'll move on to our next question. Let me take a look at what's been submitted through the Q&A app. And again, feel free to +1 any of the questions that you want us to answer. All right, we're going to move on to our next question from Eric Whitney. So as a Google Apps admin, how can I monitor who in my organization is using Google Plus Hangouts? And Patrick, we'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we don't yet have an ability to sort of see in real time exactly who is using Hangouts at any particular time. But we do have reporting APIs that are available, so you can see how many calls are made and how many minutes are being used and so on within Hangouts. So you can see how much the platform is being utilized. But you do have the ability to, if you want, you can see how people are using Hangouts more in an ad hoc way as well. But yeah, that's on an aggregate view, you can definitely get that information.
Got it. And I'm curious, any of our panelists, is there anything that you do to monitor use of Google Plus Hangouts in your organizations?
We do. We've taken a look at the numbers, and we do use some of those report APIs. So we like to see whether people are making calls. We also use as a proxy the number of Google Plus profiles that have been created out of the folks who have had access. And we know it's not exactly a one-to-one, but primarily we've seen that folks who enable a Google Plus profile are doing so because they want to use Hangouts.
All right, so we'll move on to our next question that's come up in the live chat. And this one is more product related. This one comes from Ben Snowden, and he's interested in restrictions. So Patrick, is there a way to restrict Hangouts on Air so they can only be viewed by people within a domain?
Yeah, this is a super popular question. So I think everyone kind of recognizes the value of Hangouts on Air like we're using right now. So we have seen a lot of demand for that. And it is something we'd love to look at and look into more detail, but we can't comment much about the future, but yes, we definitely recognize the need. So if you are using Hangouts on Air as they are today, what you can do is if you run a Hangout on Air and you don't really publicize it much, frankly, you do run the risk. It's not a private discussion. Anyone can literally join in and view it. But if you're careful about how you manage it, there are some customers I know that will still run, frankly, town hall meetings on Hangouts on Air, but they won't publicize it and they won't share the links and things like that. And so, if it's not so much sort of sensitive information, some people get by with that. The recording that comes out afterwards on YouTube, you can then control it. Once it's recorded on YouTube, you can go back and then mark it as sort of domain only or sort of make it private and pull it down if you want to, in fact. But you can't change the setting in the real-time effect at the moment.
Got it. And I just realized I missed another product question, so I want to make sure we have time to answer this one as well. This one's from Jonathan Bell. So he wants to know if there's a way to record Hangouts without going on air.
Yeah, so I mean, it's basically the only way to record right now is if you're using a Hangout on Air right now. I know some customers have used other software to basically record directly from one of their endpoints, so a laptop or something like that. I've seen people use tools like Camtasia and things like that to do that. but at the moment there is no functionality right now within Hangouts to do it. But yeah, again, another popular question or request. Looks good.
Got it. All right. And then another product question. So we noticed that Uber Conference was recently introduced as an application in the Hangouts environment. So how are those apps implemented exactly?
Yeah, so the apps, there's basically a common framework for the apps within Hangouts. They're all web apps. There are some other third-party apps that have been added to that suite, but Uber Conference makes use of some APIs that we're sort of basically testing out initially just with them for the moment. And it's really just, in their particular case, they have the ability to automatically dial a call and put in some code so that you can easily dial a phone conference, right? So it's just a single click. It knows who you are logging into the Hangout, so you don't have to enter any codes. You just literally jump into your audio bridge as a sort of default path for any Hangout that you may have. So that makes it really, really easy. But there are some things that other Hangout app developers can create within the Hangouts framework.
Okay, and just a follow-up question, or actually two questions for that, is how is the hierarchy applied, and can we, as customers, access the Hangout APIs to build them ourselves?
Yeah, so there isn't really a hierarchy that you can control necessarily within, I'm assuming that's referring to the set of icons on the left-hand side, or the picker, or whatever you want to call that. But right now, if you click on the More section, then you can get to the other apps that are developed in there. And like I said, they're not all developed by Google necessarily. But it does allow you to pick from within that set. Once you pick one, it then goes into the left-hand bar. But at the moment, there isn't a way, at least that I'm aware of, that you can put an app on the left-hand bar.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm just going to take a quick look at the other live questions that you're submitting. Remember, you can +1 any questions that you like. So we'll move on to another question. It looks like another popular question here is around gathering metrics on usage. So I think this is a great question for our panelists. And Rebecca, we can start with you again. Is how are you gathering metrics on usage? What are you doing? I know you Rebecca, discussed that you're monitoring some of that at Kaplan.
We do. Again, we use the reports APIs to pull some of the statistics that are most important to us, right? So we're taking a look at the ones that are currently available. And again, we use the creation of the Google Plus profile as a proxy to see how many people are using the Hangouts feature.
Okay, great. And Dawn or Jason, I don't know if you want to share anything else about how you're gathering metrics.
Yeah, so we are doing a similar reporting structure based on the reporting APIs. We're also heavily monitoring our network flow just to see, based on the number of meetings and at certain times of the day, if there seems to be an increased amount of traffic, and matching up those two different reporting tools to see if we can really get a harness on how much we're actually using bandwidth-wise as far as costing goes, and then as far as appetite for Hangouts.
All right, and Jason, I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that. I know Eventbrite's a smaller organization. Are you doing anything in addition or differently to monitor usage of Google Plus Hangouts?
Well, we don't do any active monitoring about whether people are using it or how often they're using it. We do have all new employees set up a Google Plus profile, so that's just kind of part of our onboarding process. So people are using Google Plus for internal company sharing anyways, which means that they also have the ability to do Hangouts. Probably on a more informal sense, we do see, I will walk by a meeting room and peek in and see if somebody's using a Chromebox for meeting. We do hear reports of how things are going with it. As the IT team, we manage all the different requests for help with video conferencing and things like that. So we do know that people are using them quite a bit. We don't know exactly how much, but it's been a good tool for us.
And it looks like there's a few questions coming in related to training and user adoption. So I'd like all of the panelists to tell us a little bit more about any training or specific user adoption strategies that maybe you put into place related to Google Plus Hangouts. And Rebecca, why don't we start with you?
I always get to go first. This is fun. So when we first launched Google Plus Hangouts, we actually put together a fairly comprehensive guide around how to set up a Google profile. We set up instructions for how to use them. We published our best practices on hardware requirements and who to contact for support. Admittedly, we haven't done any follow-up. We don't provide any specific training, but we do point people to those instruction guides and manuals to use as new employees join the company.
Great. And Dawn, what did you do at CBC related to training on Google Plus Hangouts or any user adoption stuff?
So as part of our Go Live, we actually adopted an eBoost learning module, which we created as part of our Go Live, Going Google site that we did. And in it, it gave specific scenarios for people on how to use Hangouts. And then we broke it down by chat, by video conferencing, outlining hardware and things like that. And we haven't, I guess we're in the same boat again, as Rebecca noted, we haven't really done as much promotion on the different apps that you can include and start using. It's been a very organic adoption that way, and people that are excited by it and want to try it, just try. And that's where we've seen the most actual growth. So we're about to do some more promotion of it. As you can imagine, with the Chrome boxes and for meeting, that's really been our kickstart into the next realm of having Hangouts for meetings and how we can best use that. It's really going to be a critical driver as far as keeping down travel expenses from across the country and really leveraging on the tools that we've already commissioned.
Great. And Jason, what about Eventbrite? Did you do any specific training or user adoption stuff related to Google Plus Hangouts or Chromebox for meetings?
Well, I guess we did a few different things, some of it formal and some of it a little more informal. We did do a formal introduction to Google Plus as kind of the starting point when we rolled that out across the company. So that got everybody introduced to the idea of Google Plus. And we felt like that was important because that is kind of the starting point for getting into all the other Google Plus Hangouts features. After we rolled out Hangouts across the enterprise, we sent out some documentation on how to use it, what it is, what are the things you can and can't do with it. And then as far as the Chromebox for Meetings part, we also sent out links that were to Google Docs that showed how to set up a Google Hangout using a Chromebox for Meeting. And we have little printouts inside each of the rooms that have basically a little cheat sheet. You know, you go to g.co/hangout to go start a Hangout, and this is how you would present a screen share, and these are the buttons you push on the remote. So we kind of did that, but then beyond that, I think a lot of it was kind of organic adoption and organic training. You know, one guy learns how to use this device and shows the next person, or sometimes they'll ask us and we'll show them how to use it, and then they can show the next person. So we find that the more that people use the devices, the more comfortable they feel, and the fewer requests that we field to actually set up a Chromebox for Meeting for anybody.
Great. So sounds like there was a bit of training and some user adoption strategies applied to launching Google Plus Hangouts for our panelist organizations. And I heard a couple themes. One was organic, so it sounds like a lot of this has really been organic adoption, and then a variety of training methods from e-learning to handouts and cheat sheets. So really interesting. All right, we'll go to our next live question. This one's from Tom. And Tom says, we currently use Skype and are migrating to Hangouts. And we have a Skype group and all of our team members. The Skype group is always open, so people can drop in and ask questions for team members. Is there something similar that can be done with Hangouts? And Patrick, maybe we can start with you, and then we'll see if any of our panelists have any thoughts as well.
Yeah, actually, I mean, there's one simple idea is to just, so again, going back to these Google Plus premium features, you can, once you enable those, then you can create named Hangouts. So then you just go to, I think Jason mentioned this, you go to g.co/hangout and then / whatever name you like, or you can just go to that URL and create the name on that page. It's a very pretty UI. And that will create a named Hangout. Now, anyone within the organization that joins that Hangout at any time will be joining as part of the same group. So just as an example, our tech stop, which is sort of like our IT support here at Google, they keep screens running all the time between different tech stops. And so they just basically have these like virtual walls to other areas. So, and the way they do it is just they create a named Hangout specific to that particular group and hook up that particular unit and join that Hangout. Because it's a common name that's agreed ahead of time, then any time people dip in, dip out, they'll join the same Hangout. I don't know if the panelists have similar cases.
Yeah,
but
maybe Jason, you can talk a little bit more about that persistent chat example. I think that sounds pretty similar to what Tom is asking about. So Jason, tell us a little bit more about persistent chat and maybe how you set that up and use that at Eventbrite.
Sure. Well, I can share the example of how we use it on our IT team. So we have a group chat, and we added each of the members of the IT team to it, and we type stuff in there and we chat with each other. And the nice thing about it is that in my Hangouts panel, if I type in the name of that chat, it will come up again with the same number of people in it, with the past history of the chat, and we can scroll back and kind of see what was talked about. So that's a method. You could probably, I don't know what the maximum number of people you can have in a group chat is, but you could probably, put in a bunch of people that need to be on that and kind of have it as a persistent chat, or do it the way that Patrick was suggesting, which is to have a named Hangout and always use the same name for that Hangout. So if you have a standing meeting, say you have a weekly stand-up meeting at 10 a.m. and 2 or 3 members of that team are always working from home on that day, they could just know that all they have to do is go to that room and they'll see everybody there. So yeah, that's a way you could do it.
Thanks, Jason. I totally forgot about the chat side of things as well. So that's a good point.
Great. And Don, I don't know if you have any similar examples from CBC that you'd like to share related to having that group hangout.
Actually, the same one that's been echoed already is just having that sort of persistent group chat that seems to be really useful in a lot of different locations.
Okay. Rebecca, anything else to add?
We actually used a persistent Hangout when we deployed Google Apps in our UK division. We had representatives go out to each of the locations, and so we who were sort of central and wanted to triage issues as they came in, we opened the Hangout and people could come in as they needed. It was assigned to a calendar invite for the day, and people would sort of come in and report issues and sneak back out. And so we had that running for the length of the day, which was incredibly helpful. We're just now starting to use named Hangouts, so I'm not sure how many different kinds of use cases we'll come up with for that, but I'm sure we'll come up with quite a few. We're loving the named Hangouts. So.
Very cool. So Hangouts for Go Live support. I like that example. I know a lot of customers who could apply that during their deployments as well. All right, our next question is for the panelists and probably also for Patrick around the product. So what types of USB webcams and conference phones have the other panelists used when using Hangouts in larger conference rooms? Has anyone used USB PTZ cameras? So anyone? Any of the panelists used those cameras before? And if not, what have you used?
Yeah, we've used it. We've used one USB PTZ camera. It's a Logitech one that looks like a robot. It's got like a long stick with an eyeball on top, and you can move it around. We tested that out a little bit when we were using Chromebox for meetings. So that does work. It has worked for us. The ones we have installed in all the rooms are the standard Logitech C920 camera or something like that. And then the USB mic is, can't see it, but we're using, we're using that one there. And that one actually works pretty well. We've seen it be able to function in rooms that have had as many as 10 or 15 people in there. And we actually tested it out where I stood in one corner and somebody else was listening in another room, and I tried to be as far away as possible, turn my body, and they actually pick up pretty well in rooms of 10 to 15 people. So that's worked out for us. And that mic I just showed was the one that comes with the Chromebox for meetings, and so that one has worked pretty well for us.
Great. Dawn, I'm not sure if there's anything you want to share about the cameras you've used at CBC.
Yeah, so we're using the exact same ones, the little eyeball on a stick Logitech ones. We also deploy, because some of the machines that we're using in some of the more remote locations, they actually don't have rooms that we are deploying this to yet. So to get the Hangouts going and to get that adoption rate up before we deploy a whole room setup, is we actually use the Logitech desktop clip-on webcam with the built-in mic, so that it actually picks up a really great sound. More importantly, what I'm finding with our deployments for the Chromebox for meetings, it's less about the actual webcams and the speakers and the mics and things like that. It's more about the size of room that you're deploying it in. And as Jason said, he was in a room that was about a 10 to 15 person room, and what we're experimenting with is obviously sound absorption, sound reflection, things like that, because if we are using any of our Hangouts and we are putting them to air, then we want to make sure that we have optimal quality audio and video. So the actual environment, aside from the technology pieces itself, is really important for getting the best sort of setting for your meeting.
Great. And Rebecca, what about Kaplan? I'm sure you have different needs, maybe classrooms and things like that. What types of cameras are you using?
Yeah, so we're, excuse me, we're just now beginning a pilot with the Chromebox for meetings, so we don't have a lot of expertise there yet, but we do have a custom configuration for our CapEx development team for their daily Scrum meetings, and we have partners who participate in that meeting from across the country, and we also have an eyeball on a stick, which is my new favorite phrase. We have an eyeball on a stick over in their development team area, so that they can capture as many of the people in that shared space as possible to participate, and it's worked out really well.
Great. And Patrick, anything to add about any of the product?
The only thing I would say is, from my experience, is that most of my Hangouts are actually from my laptop. So, it's actually my Chromebook over there. It's just hooked into a $5 mic that sits in my ear. And the only reason for that is that I like the microphone a little bit further away from the keyboard. But I actually prefer, frankly, the camera that comes with the laptop or my tablet or phone right there in the screen, because then it's close to like what, the other people you're looking at or the content you're presenting or something like that. So that's my own personal preference. Frankly, I don't go very fancy with my own setup. But from our own experience at Google, the best thing is to have something that just sucks in a lot of light, right? So that's typically Lens if you're looking at a webcam. And then in terms of microphone, try and keep it away from the keyboard is the most obvious recommendation.
Great. All right, so we've got some more questions coming up, and we're running out of time. So if you have any more questions, please submit them now, and we'll do our best to get to the ones that you've asked. Our next question comes from Caleb. So Caleb wants to know how many employees are in the business showcased in the case stories today. So we'll just go to each panelist and just tell us how many employees are in your organization. I think that's the question. And Rebecca, why don't we start with you? How many employees are there at Kaplan today?
We have approximately 22,000 employees on the Google Apps platform today.
Okay. And Dawn, what about CBC Radio Canada?
We have about between 15 and 20,000. It fluctuates as we have a lot of staff that are freelancers. So depending on the moments and the events that are going on, clearly we're coming off of a very large global event. So we have an upswing because we've created a few accounts, but a steady stream of accounts would be 15,000.
Okay. And Jason, what about Eventbrite? How many employees?
We're at a magnitude of 10 or so less. So we're at about 330 employees right now.
Great. Yeah, so we've got a variety here. We've got two very large organizations, and then Jason representing a smaller organization. But you can see they actually have similar use cases with Google Plus Hangouts. And that's what I've found interesting today, is it seems very flexible. So even small and large organizations can use it. All right, we'll move on to our next question. This one's from Brian. So any of the panelists using other technologies like a TriCaster video switcher to supplement Hangouts or Hangouts on Air? And Dawn, why don't we start with you, given that you are in the broadcasting field. Are you using any video switchers to supplement Hangouts?
We are using a TriCaster switcher. We've used that in the past. I would say, though, because of the nature, again, of the content that we're trying to do, some of our material that we record isn't always ready for public consumption. So the fact that Hangouts on Air is not restricted yet to within a domain when it's being recorded, we haven't actually been able to use that to the extent that we'd like to or that we're looking forward to. So we're ready when it's ready, and yeah, I'd say that's where we're at right now.
Okay, great. And Rebecca, are you using anything like that at Kaplan?
Yeah, I'd have to refer you to our video production team,
okay.
Who really manages the way we use Hangouts on Air in some of our custom products.
All right. Jason, do you know anything about use of that video switcher with Eventbrite?
No, we haven't done anything like that.
Okay, great. All right, we'll move on to a few more live questions before we wrap up for today. So next we've got one from Adam. So was there any measurement of the value in troubleshooting of the broadcast in Sochi? So this one is for Dawn about the Olympics. I loved that story that you shared about Sochi. So any measurement of, the value that added, or, any time that was able to save regarding that specific story?
Absolutely. So regarding that particular event where we had a hillside venue triage being done, it really comes down to the ability of, well, the way we measure it is that we didn't have to fly someone over there to go and help do that. And we didn't require the use of a sat phone and therefore have to buy more signal strength or reserve anything like that. So really, and just to flesh it out a little bit more in the moment that I have, we did all of the Sochi games using all of the Google products. And so it was really for us a really first step in going to the cloud on such a large event, and obviously of such significance for our viewers. But yeah, Hangouts for sure really allowed us to really keep the costs down and get the things back to air that we really needed to in the moment. So revenue-wise, it was hugely efficient.
Great. All right, we'll move on to our next question. This one is from Kevin. So he wants to know, is there an app for picture-in-picture while screen sharing? So this specific use case he's interested in would be used for training. So the presenter could be seen during a Hangout or Hangout on Air. And Patrick, do you know anything about that? Or is there any, perhaps workaround or different way you could do that?
Yeah, so that's to basically broadcast like 2 streams at once, right? There isn't. I'm not aware of an app off the top of my head that I haven't explored recently specifically for this use case. But one thing I have done is I have seen is where people basically just join from 2 machines, right? So you can have one machine that's just presenting, so you may be presenting some information, and we're kind of doing that today, frankly. We have one that's presenting a video feed, and we can also present from another location as well. So you can have one that's presenting your desktop, one that's presenting your video. And then actually each individual participant can pin, if they want to only look at one thing, if you have someone talking, instead of it switching back and forth with the video, you can have, people can just pin the presentation view, put it that way, or the demo view, and then you can still see the sort of video in the lower right-hand corner as thumbnails. But that's probably the most common way that people do that. The only other thing I would say is that sometimes people do some funky things with desktop screen sharing and then put a video feed in there. I have done that for demos where I'm demoing a mobile device, and I'll take a video feed from something and stick it onto my mobile device and then basically broadcast my desktop, which sounds a bit strange, but then I can basically show 2 different things at the same time within the same feed. But those are the only tips I can give off the top of my head.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know that personally when I've been doing Hangouts or Hangouts on Air, sometimes I do use the 2 machine setup that you noted. So I'll have one where I'm presenting and the other one where you can just see the face of the person that's presenting. So that's something we've definitely used here at Google.
One pro tip I would add, though, with named Hangouts, there is g.co/present, which you can use, and it basically stops you presenting video feed. It's only for desktop sharing, so it's very handy in meeting rooms, but it's basically handy in any location where you've got a video feed as well as like a desktop sharing feed. It stops you, sending audio twice and all that kind of stuff. So
you don't get that annoying sound.
The annoying feedback thing of like, yeah.
All right, we'll move on to a few more questions. We've got one from Daron, and apologies if I mispronounced your first name, but How much are the panelists using the Google Plus domain API to monitor usage and things like that? So are you using that API? Rebecca, why don't we start with you?
Right now, we're actually not using that very much, so I'm not a good case for this right now.
Okay, Dawn, are you using that at CBC?
No, sadly, no? I feel like Rebecca and I are neck and neck. We're at the same pace. No, we're really not. We're not quite there yet.
All right, Jason, how about you?
Nope, not for us either.
Okay, so now I'm going to actually pass this over to Patrick. Have you, do you have any examples to share of people using that API?
Yeah, there's two examples that I think are the most sort of, I don't know, interesting. So one is the API does let you see exactly what has been posted and by whom and so on. So you can sort of monitor things like that. And there are some really good tools out there that do this. So there's lots of third-party tools. If you look at the Google Apps Marketplace, you'll see tools actually integrate and do this out of the box. But you can go in and use those APIs and see what's been posted and so on. And there is an ability with some technical stuff called OAuth where you can actually go in and adjust those things as well. The other side that's very handy is that people use this to sort of, it's normally when they're just up and going with Google Plus all at once for their entire organization. The nature of a social environment is that when you jump in, you don't have any data with which to kind of exchange. It's not like, the personal social environment where you jump in and there's context, you have friends that you're talking to and so on, so you have those relationships and you can sort of navigate through the content. If you launch an entire organization on Plus at once, there's basically nothing there. So what companies have done is used, the customer comes to mind as Ocado in the UK, you can use those APIs to basically preset certain information. So you can connect, for example, it could be your directory of users within your organization and sort of feed that in as a sort of seed of a social group. And that way, when you jump into the social platform, it's already apparent, who are good people to communicate with and contact. And that way it sort of gets the social environment up and running quicker. It makes it a little bit more sense, right? Instead of sort of having to connect to random people you're not sure what to do. But yeah, those are the two that come to mind.
Great, and we're almost at the end of our time, but we'll take one more quick question here from Molly. So he wants to know if Chromebox supports Hangouts on Air. So that's for you, Patrick.
So Chromebox is basically just another endpoint. It's basically just like another person, just like in this Hangout right now. It's perfectly feasible for someone else to have, been in that, to have joined from another device somewhere else within a Hangout. So a Hangout on Air is a Hangout, and then we also broadcast part of it. So technically speaking, there's no reason why a Chromebox shouldn't be able to join. The only caveat to that is that you have to make sure that it's also a named Hangout. So there's some jigs and reels that need to be in place first, but I don't see any reason why not.
Okay, great. Well, that brings us to the end of today's Hangout on Air on Google Plus Hangouts. I want to thank Patrick for joining us today, as well as our 3 customer panelists. So Rebecca, Dawn, Jason, thank you so much for sharing your stories and for taking the time to join us today. Also, thank you to everyone who submitted questions and watched the live broadcast. So tune in March. We're going to be doing another Hangout on Air similar to this one, where we'll focus on user adoption strategies. So I hope you can join in on that live broadcast. Thanks.